Hello dear aspirants, welcome to Epitome IAS. So as we saw in the introduction class, we are starting with a new initiative, that is the PYQ analysis of the UPSC prelims. So as we already saw, we are going to do the topic wise PYQ analysis. The first topic here is from the Indian polity, and the topic is the political theories. So let us start doing the PYQ analysis. So if you see here, the first question is, in essence, what does due process of law mean? This question was asked in 2023. So the options given are: option A, the principle of natural justice; option B, the procedure established by law; option C, fair application of law; option D, equality before law. So before answering this question, we have to understand what is due process of law. We should also be able to understand another concept related to this, that is procedure established by law. And you should also be able to understand the difference between the procedure established by law and the due process of law. So first of all, what is procedure established by law? The term procedure established by law is explicitly mentioned in Article 21 of the Indian Constitution. So, what does the Article 21 say? The Article 21 says that no person shall be deprived of his life or personal liberty except in accordance with the procedure established by law. So, this is the term which was mentioned in the Article 21 of the Indian Constitution. So, what does this term procedure established by law means? It simply means two things. One is whether any particular law is made by a competent authority. And the second question is whether correct procedure has been followed to enact that particular law. So these are the two questions which we ask in case of the particular procedure established by law. Let us say the government is coming up with an act, and in that particular act it is putting a person into death sentence. So in this case, the judiciary can go intervene and ask only two questions: whether this particular law is made by the competent authority, and the second question, whether the correct procedure has been followed to make that particular law. It cannot go and question whether the particular law is reasonable or fair or just. Okay, so this is the procedure established by law. So this is different from the due process of law. So what is due process of law? Along with these two questions, a third question comes in, that is whether the law is fair or reasonable. So the judiciary can question whether the competent authority has made the law, whether correct procedure has been followed to make that particular law, and also it can question whether the law is fair, reasonable and just. So let us have a quick history of what's happening and whether we are following procedure established by law or due process of law in the Indian context. So if we see when we got independence, so we were a new country. So obviously there was a discussion whether we should come up with the procedure established by law or the due process of law. So actually B.R. Ambedkar, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar told we have to come up with the due process of law. But because we were a new country, if we are coming up with the due process of law, it will put a lot of burden in the judiciary, because judiciary can't examine each and every law whether it's fair or reasonable. So that's why we have come up with the procedure established by law when we came up with the constitution. But with time goes, like there was a major judgment by the Supreme Court in the case of A.K. Gopalan. So in this case, the Supreme Court has given a major judgment. It took a narrow interpretation that we should be following only the procedure established by law. So what happened in this case was A.K. Gopalan was convicted in the preventive detention law just because he belongs to the opposition party. So he came to the Supreme Court and he said it is threatening my life and liberty under Article 21. So the Supreme Court took a very narrow interpretation of this procedure established by law, and it said we can examine whether this particular law has been made by a competent authority? Yes, it was made by a competent authority, and we can check whether correct procedure has been followed to make that particular law. Yes, that has been done. So we can't examine whether that particular law is fair or just. So that's what the Supreme Court said. But in later period, after what do you say, after some years, in the Menaka Gandhi case of 1978, the Supreme Court came up with a wider interpretation. So the Supreme Court said, no, it is not fair whether we are checking whether the first 2 points, we should also check whether the particular law is fair or just to actually preserve the liberty, life and liberty of an individual. Otherwise, what will happen? The government can make any law, it can act arbitrarily, so it will threaten the liberty and life of a particular individual, which is guaranteed in the Article 21 of the Constitution. So now let us go back and answer this particular question. So if you see here, what is due process of law? So the principle of natural justice. Yes, the principle of natural justice is part of the due process of law. What is principle of natural justice? It is whether the law is fair, reasonable, and just. So this is part of a due process of law. So this is not the full due process of law. So this option is wrong. Then the procedure established by law. So we already saw the difference between the procedure established by law and the due process of law. So we can eliminate this option as well. And equality before law. So this is not due process of law. We can eliminate this option as well. The option correct answer is, that is, fair application of law. So in due process of law, we check whether any particular law is applied, it is fair or reasonable. So that would be the right answer. So the right answer is option C. We'll go to the next question. Which one of the following statements best reflects the chief purpose of a constitution of a country? So this question was also asked in 2023. Option A, it determines the objective for making of necessary laws. Option B, it enables the creation of political officers and a government. Option C, it defines and limits the powers of the government. Option D, it secures social justice, social equality, and social security. So before answering this question, let us see what is the constitutional form of government. So we all know that there are three major organs of the government. What are they? The executive, the legislature, and the judiciary. So tell me whether the government is the supreme authority. No, the government is not the supreme authority. Then who is the supreme authority? The Constitution of India is the supreme authority. So no one is above the Constitution, even the government is not above the Constitution. The Constitution has clearly mentioned or defined the functions of the government. It defined the clear functions of each organs of the government. In a way, we can say that the Constitution restricts or limits the powers of the government. The Constitution restricts and limits the power of the government, and the government should act inconsistent with the Constitution. It cannot go against the Constitution. It cannot act arbitrarily on its own. So now let us come back to this question. So they are asking, what is the chief purpose of the Constitution? So the chief purpose of the Constitution is to define and to limit the power of the government. So the option C is the right answer. So let us go to the next question. Question number 3. Which one of the following best defines the term state? This question was asked in 2021. Option A, a community of persons permanently occupying a definite territory, independent of external control and possessing an organized government. Option B, a politically organized people of a definite territory and possessing an authority to govern them, maintain law and order, protect their natural rights, and safeguard their means of subsistence. Option C, a number of persons who have been living in a definite territory for a very long time with their own culture, tradition, and government. Option D, a society permanently living in a definite territory with a central authority, an executive responsible to the central authority, and an independent judiciary. So, before answering this question, let us see what is a state. So if you see, a state has four important components. What are they? One, that is population. Two, that is territory. Three, the government. And four, this is the most important, that is sovereignty. So these are the four components to a state. So now let us answer this particular question. If we see option a community of person. Yes, this is the population. Permanently occupying a definite territory. So the territory, the second point. And independent of external control. This is nothing but sovereignty. Possessing an organized government. So government. Yes, this particular option is fulfilling the four components. So this can be a correct answer. So let us check the other options as well. Option B, a politically organized people, population, definite territory, possessing an authority to govern them, government, maintain law and order, protect their natural rights, safeguard their means of subsistence. All these comes under government. There is no mention of sovereignty here. So this option is wrong. Then if we see option C, a number of persons, yeah, first point population, who have been living in a definite territory, second point territory, for a very long time with their own culture, tradition and government. So government is also satisfied, but there is no mention of the sovereignty here. So this option is also wrong. Let us see the option D. A society permanently living. Society, this is nothing but the population living in a definite territory. Yes, the second point territory with a central authority. This is nothing but the government. Executive responsible to the central authority and an independent judiciary. So there is a mention of government, but there is no mention of the sovereignty. So this particular option is also wrong. So the correct answer would be option A, because it has the four components of the state. So now let us go to the next question. Question number 4. Which one of the following factors constitutes the best safeguard of liberty in a liberal democracy? In a liberal democracy, they show more interest on preserving the individual liberty. So they are asking which of this particular option is best safeguarding the liberty in a liberal democracy. Option A, committed judiciary. Option B, centralization of powers. Option C, elected government. Option D, separation of powers. So if you see here, option A, this is committed judiciary. What is a committed judiciary? As we already saw, the government has three major organs: the executive, legislative, and judiciary. So the committed judiciary is nothing but the judiciary is actually supporting the government. So if the government, whether the executive or the legislative, is doing something unreasonable, so the judiciary, instead of questioning them, it is supporting them. So if you see here, the committed judiciary will actually threaten the liberty of an individual. It will not safeguard the liberty of an individual. So what we can do is, we can eliminate this option. And option B, centralization of powers. Again, centralization of power is nothing but concentration of powers in the hands of the government. So the government will act arbitrarily, and it will again threaten the liberty of an individual. It will not safeguard the liberty of an individual. So this option is also wrong. Then if we see elected government, so in case of an elected government, it is not necessarily going to preserve the liberty, individual liberty. If a good government comes, yes, it will do. But if a bad government will come, it will not necessarily preserve the individual liberty. So this option is also wrong. Then option D, separation of powers. So what is separation of powers? As we saw here, each and every organ of the government, they have different roles and responsibilities for themselves. So one particular organ cannot interfere in the works of another organ. This is separation of power. And another fact is, if one particular organ is acting arbitrarily, if it is acting unreasonably, or if it is misusing its power, another organ will come and question this particular organ. So this will act as checks and balances. So this will act as checks and balances. So this is separation of power. So in case of separation of power, yes, the government cannot act arbitrarily. It will preserve the liberty of an individual. So this is the correct answer. Option D is the correct answer. So let us go to the next question. So if we see question number 5, it is about the constitutional form of government. So the constitutional government means option A representative government of a nation with federal structure. Option B, a government whose head enjoys nominal powers. Option C, a government whose head enjoys real powers. Option D, a government limited by the terms of the constitution. So we already saw that the constitution clearly defines the functions of the government. The government is not above the constitution. In fact, no one is above the constitution. So the government should act inconsistent with the constitution. It cannot go against the constitution. So what does a constitutional government mean? A constitutional government means the government limited by the terms of the constitution. So this is the right answer. Then the next question. A parliamentary system of government is one in which option A, all political parties in the parliament are represented in the government. Option B, the government is responsible to the parliament and can be removed by it. Option C, the government is elected by the people and can be removed by them. Option D, the government is chosen by the parliament but cannot be removed by it before the completion of a fixed term. So first tell me whether we have parliamentary system of government in India. Yes, we have parliamentary system of government in India. So by common sense, what we'll do is we try to eliminate the options in case of India. So if we see option D here, the government is chosen by the parliament. Is this true? Yes, the government is chosen by the parliament by the majority. But it cannot be removed by it before the completion of a fixed term. Is it true? No, the parliament can remove the government by passing a no confidence motion in the Lok Sabha. So this particular option is wrong. Then in case of option C, the government is elected by the people. Yes, this particular statement is correct. The government is elected by the people and can be removed by them. So is it correct? Can we remove the government? No, the people can't remove the government. Only the government can be removed by passing no confidence motion in the Lok Sabha. So this particular statement is also wrong. The government, if we see option A, all political parties in the parliament are represented in the government. So tell me whether all political parties are represented in the government. No, not all political parties are represented in the government. Only the political parties which have the majority are represented in the government. So this particular option is also wrong. And if we see option B here, the government is responsible to the parliament. Yes, the government is responsible to the parliament and can be removed by it. Yes, the parliament can remove the government by passing the no confidence motion in the Lok Sabha. So this option, option B, is the right answer. So let us go to the next question. So these are some of the features of the parliamentary form of government. So you can have a look at it. So the next question. One common agreement between Gandhism and Marxism is option A, the final goal of a stateless society. Option B, class struggle. Option C, abolition of private property. Option D, economic determinism. So if we see, mostly the principles of Gandhi and the Marx are almost contradictory to each other. But there is one case where they have a common agreement, that is to have a final goal of a stateless society, even though the reason which they have given that is different. So let us see what it is. In case of Gandhi, he believes that if we have a state, we have to maintain the army, that is against the non-violence principle, right? So he is against the state. So that is one point. Then the second point is Gandhi believes in the individualism. He believes each individual is unique in nature, and if we have a state and we have a common law, it will not help the individuals to develop oneself. So that's why he want a stateless society. But in case of Marx, what he believes is so in case of Marx, what he believes is in a society where there is a state, it will create inequality. How? Usually the state supports the rich, the powerful, and it will cause a discrimination between the poor and the rich. So that's why Marx is against the state, and he also prefers a stateless society. So this particular option, this is the correct answer. So let us check with the other options as well. So if we see here the class struggle. So what does Marx says? What Marx believes is, yes, there is a inherent class struggle which happens between the rich versus the poor. But Gandhiji, he did not believe in class struggle. He believes in class harmony. Even though there are different classes, he believes in the harmonial or peaceful coexistence between the classes. So this is not the right answer. And if we see option C, abolition of a private property. So Marx actually believed in abolition of a private property because he believed that the private property causes the discrimination between the powerful and the weak, between the rich and the poor. So this is what Marx believed. What does Gandhi believe? He does not believe in the abolition of the private property. In fact, he believed that if you are able to earn money, if you are able to earn property, you should do that. But instead, what he said is, you should be remembering that this particular property which you have earned, it's not yours, it is the society's property. Okay, so you should be doing good to the society, you should act as a trustee. So you are not the owner of the property, you are the trustee of the property. This is what Gandhi believed. So this option is also wrong. Then if we see option D, economic determinism. What is economic determinism? Economic determinism is nothing but in a society, economy determines everything. If the economy is good, if the economy is strong, then the society and the polity will also be strong. If it is weak, then the society and the polity will also be weak. So the Marx believe on the economic determinism. He believed that economy is the basis for it determines everything else in the society. But Gandhiji did not believe in economic determinism. So this option is also wrong. So let us go to the next question. So the question number 8. A constitutional government by definition is a option A, government by legislature, option B, popular government, option C, multi-party government, option D, limited government. Now you try to answer this question. We have already saw a number of questions in the constitutional form of government. So yes, the answer is limited government. The constitution limits the powers of the government. So this is the right answer. Now let us go to the next question. In the context of polity, which one of the following would you accept as the most appropriate definition of a liberty? Option A, protection against the tyranny of the political rulers. Option B, absence of restraint. Option C, opportunity to do whatever one likes. Option D, opportunity to develop oneself fully. So before answering this question, you should be able to understand there is a difference between liberty and the freedom. So what is liberty and what is freedom? So freedom is nothing but the ability to do whatever you want without any restriction. You can do whatever you want. And what is liberty? How it is different from the freedom? So let me give you an example. Let us say there is a person who likes to smoke. Now he has freedom to smoke, but he can't go to an hospital and say, I can smoke here. Right? So he has the liberty to smoke. So liberty is nothing but it comes with some sort of restriction. And freedom is nothing but it has no restriction. So now let's try to answer this question. Option A, protection against the tyranny of the political rulers. No, this is not liberty. And absence of restraint. What is absence of restraint? If there is no restriction, it is freedom. It is not liberty. So this is also a not correct answer. Then option C, opportunity to do whatever one likes. What is opportunity to do whatever one likes? It's freedom. It's not liberty. So this statement is also wrong. Then option D, opportunity to develop oneself. So if you see here, let's say there is a person. He has his own sphere of liberty. And there is another person. He has his own sphere of liberty. Let's say this is person A, this is person B. Now person A can't go and abuse person B and say this is I have freedom of speech, so I can say whatever I want. No, right? So in case of liberty, within your sphere of liberty, you can do whatever you want, but you can't go and impact another one's liberty and say it is my liberty. So in a sense, we can say liberty is nothing but within your sphere, you are developing yourself. So this option, opportunity to develop whatever oneself, this is the right option, right answer. So let us go to the next question. Which of the following reflects the most appropriate relationship between law and liberty? So this question is also from Liberty. Option A, if there are more laws, there is less liberty. Option B, if there are no laws, there is no liberty. Option C, if there is liberty, laws have to be made by the people. Option D, if laws are changed too often, liberty is in danger. So let us see here, if there is option C, if there is liberty, laws have to be made by people. So in case of India, we have liberty, right? So are we making the law? No, our representatives are making the law. So this statement will be wrong. Then if you see here option D, if laws are changed too often, liberty is in danger. So with time changes, laws are amended again and again. So this does not necessarily mean the liberty is in danger. So this option is also wrong. And if you see option A, if there are more laws, there is less liberty. So let's say the laws are of two types, a good law, a bad law. So if there are more number of good laws, it will actually preserve the individual liberty. It will not threaten the liberty. If there are more number of bad laws, yes, it will threaten the liberty. So this option is also wrong. The more number of laws does not necessarily mean the liberty is in danger. So if you see option B, if there are no laws, there is no liberty. Yes, this is correct. Let us imagine that there is no law in our country. So what will happen? Everything will be chaos. The powerful people will actually suppress the weaker people. Anyone can go and murder someone, anyone can go and rob someone. It will be a complete chaos. So how will a individual liberty will be preserved? So this particular statement is the right answer, that is option B. And if you see, this particular statement is a famous quote given by John Locke. He's a famous political philosopher. So let's go to the next question. Which of the following are regarded as the main feature of the rule of law? Statement number 1, limitation of powers. Statement number 2, equality before law. Statement number 3, people's responsibility to the government. Statement number 4, liberty and civil rights. So select the correct answer. So before answering this question, let us understand what is rule of law. So rule of law is nothing but the government cannot act on its own. The government cannot act arbitrarily on its own. It is subject to act within the provisions of the law. What is the supreme law? The supreme law is the constitution. And the rule of law has some important points. The first point is no arbitrariness. So the government cannot act arbitrarily on its own. Then the second point is equality before law. So everyone is equal before law, no one is above or no one is below. Like be it a prime minister or a clerk, be it rich or poor, everyone is same, everyone is equal in front of law. That is equality before law. And the third point is no person shall be punished except according to a law. So if you want to punish a particular person, it should be according to the law. You cannot pick someone and you cannot punish the way you want, right? So these are the important points related to the rule of law. Now let us try to solve this question. Limitation of powers. Yes, in rule of law, the government's power is limited by the supreme law. The government cannot act on its own arbitrarily. So this point is correct. Equality before law. Yes, this is a point related to rule of law, that is equality before law. And where we read this in Article 14 of Indian Constitution. And people's responsibility to the government. Usually the government is responsible to the people because they are our representative. The people are not responsible to the government, so we can eliminate this statement. Then 4, liberty and civil right. Yes, this rule of law protects the liberty and civil rights of the people, so this is the correct statement. So when we eliminate option 3, we can actually eliminate option A and option D. So we are left with these two, B and C. So again we can see the answer is 1, 2 and 4, that is option C. So let us go to the next question. One of the implications of equality in society is the absence of option A privileges, option B restraints, option C competition, option D ideology. So for equality in society, which of this should be absent? That's what they are asking. So let us say there is no restrictions. What will happen? Again, it will be a chaos. So there will be no equality. The powerful people will suppress the weaker people. So this is not the right answer. And what about competition and ideology? If competition and ideology, they are positive terms, right? If there is absence of competition or absence of ideology, how will it will impact the equality? So these two are not related, so we can cancel these two as well. So this is the right answer, absence of privileges. So what will happen? What is a privilege? Privilege is some special powers given to some special people. Let's say there is a restaurant, but they are saying particular caste, they can't come inside the that particular restaurant. Only these particular caste can come inside the restaurant. So that is a special privilege which is given to a particular caste, right? So this is privileges. So if there are privileges, if privileges are given to particular section of people, then there is no equality. So it will be impacting the equality. So this is the right answer. So the next question, which one of the following statements is correct? Option A, rights are claims of state against the citizens. Option B, rights are privileges which are incorporated in the constitution of a state. Option C, rights are claims of the citizens against the state. Option D, rights are privileges of a few citizens against many. So, as a citizen of India, we have different types of rights. Like some are constitutional rights, some are non constitutional rights, like legal rights. So, if we see here, the first option is saying rights are claims of the state against the citizen. No, it should be the other way around, because the citizen should be having the right against the state, so that the state, the government, cannot act arbitrarily, it cannot misuse its power to the disadvantage of its citizen. So this statement is wrong. Option B, rights or privileges which are incorporated in the constitution of a state. So not necessarily incorporated in the constitution. As I already say, there are some rights like fundamental rights and other non-fundamental rights like voting rights or property rights are mentioned in the constitution. But there are many rights which are not mentioned in the constitution. They are mentioned in some sort of laws. They are called as legal rights. So this statement is also wrong. Then C, rights are claims of the citizen against the state. Yes, rights are given to the citizen against the state, so that the state, the government, cannot act arbitrarily and uh, impose something on the citizens. So this is the right answer. Option C is the right answer. If we see option D, rights are privileges of few citizens against many. So these are not rights. If there are certain privileges for few citizens, let's say we are giving some special attention to the disadvantaged group of other society, they are not rights, they are just some special positive affirmation we are giving uh, to for the development of them. Okay, so this is not rights, so this option is also wrong. Let us go to the next question. Local self government can be best explained as an exercise in option A, federalism, option B, a democratic decentralization, option C, administrative delegation, option D, direct democracy. So we already know the local self government is nothing but the democratic decentralization. So this is the right answer. So let us go to the next question. Democracy's superior virtue lies in the fact that it calls into activity. Option A, the intelligence and character of ordinary men and women. Option B, the methods for strengthening executive leadership. Option C, a superior individual with dynamism and vision. Option D, a band of dedicated party workers. So, if we see here the democracy, it actually talks about the intelligence and character of ordinary men and women. Yes, ordinary men and women are given the chance to represent. If we see option B, the methods for strengthening executive leadership. No, they don't just talk about the executive, they also talk about the legislature. So, this option is wrong. Option C, a superior individual with dynamism and vision. No, democracy is not about finding some superior individual because it talks about ordinary people. It's not about someone is superior. So, this option is wrong. Then this option D, a band of dedicated party workers. So, this is also wrong. They are not talking about the party workers. So, let us go to the next question. The main advantage of parliamentary form of government is. So this particular question they are asking about the main advantage of the parliamentary form of government. So if we see here in option A, the executive and legislature should work independently, but in case of parliamentary form of government it talks about dual membership, that is the legislature and the executive are taken by the same persons. So this option is not right. Then option B, it provides continuity of policies and is more efficient. No, that is not the case. In case of parliamentary form of government, whenever the party shows the majority, it will become the government. And when the government changes again and again, it will actually be opposite to the continuation of the policy. The policies are changed again and again with the changes in the government. Different governments comes up with different policies. So this option is also wrong. Then option C, the executive remains responsible to the legislature. Yes, the executive, let's say the council of ministers, are responsible to the legislature, are responsible to the parliament. So this statement is correct. And if you see option D, the head of the government cannot be changed without election. Is that true? No, the head of the government can be changed even without a new election being held. So this option is wrong. So the correct answer is option C. So the next question is, out of the following statements, choose the one that brings out the principle underlying the cabinet form of government. Option A, an arrangement for minimizing the criticism against the government whose responsibilities are complex and hard to carry out to the satisfaction of all. Option B, a mechanism for speeding up the activities of the government whose responsibilities are increasing day by day. Option C, a mechanism of parliamentary democracy for ensuring collective responsibility to the government to the people. Option D, a device for strengthening the hands of the head of the government whose hold over the people is in a state of decline. So, if we see the cabinet form of government is a part of parliamentary form of government. So, it is a mechanism of parliamentary democracy for ensuring the collective responsibility of the government to the people. So, this would be the correct answer. So, the next question, consider the following statements. A constitutional government is one which, statement 1, places effective restrictions on individuals' liberty in the interest of the state authority. Statement 2, places effective restriction on the authority of the state in the interest of individual liberty. So they are again talking about the constitutional form of government. We already saw the constitutional government is nothing but it restricts the government so that it cannot act arbitrarily against the individual liberty. So the first option says it places effective restriction on individual. No, it does not place any restriction on individual. So this statement is wrong. Second statement, places effective restriction on the authority of the state. Yes, it places the effective restriction on the government in the interest of individual liberty. Yes, to preserve the individual liberty. So this statement is correct. So only two. Option B is the correct answer. So that's it, student. We have done the political theories. That is the first topic of Indian polity. Let us meet in the next class. Thank you.